So welcome everybody. I've got a great guest on with me today, Charlie Homer, who is a spiritual teacher, coach. He's got a great YouTube channel as well. We're going to be having a great chat today about spirituality. Welcome, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today.
Wonderful you join me. So let's get into the chat.
Sure. Well, I was a personal trainer for quite a bit of time, sort of about 5-6 years. I went to university, and then after that, I used to really enjoy. I loved going to the gym, doing my clients. That was kind of my lifestyle. I had a vision of K. I set up a chain of gyms, something along that line. And then I had my spiritual awakening in the beginning of 2018. I remember I was just sitting at my desk at work and reading this article, and something about spirituality just popped out of the page. And that kind of started my process. It was a Kundalini awakening, I believe. And since that process, I've kind of delved into the whole world of spirituality and coaching, started doing a lot of inner work, plant medicine, meditating a couple of hours a day for quite a bit of time. And all of these things started opening up for me. And these stuff started happening to me. And obviously, you don't really plan much of this stuff. It kind of happens to you. And then I was drawn to certain people, teachers, and situations. And then I was drawn more to a healing modality that's called star magic, which is basically a non-systematical way of healing people. So with different healing modalities, is they have a system on how they go about and heal people. When you go into a healing through this method, is you drop into your heart space and you allow the information to come to you. And I basically work with light and information when it comes to this healing. And I also do a bit of light language as well, which was something I didn't seek, but it just started happening in a meditation for me. So that was really interesting. And then I'm also really interested in identity shifting. It's something that I've been working on for quite a bit of time. I'm creating a program at the moment. Sort of every area in our life can be shifted when we change our self-image, which is through that of identity shifting. So most people's identity is an accumulation of things that have happened to them. And they say, this is just simply the way that I am. But I like to go really deep into this. And by shifting one's identity, is your beliefs, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, everything in your life filters from your own self-image, your own self-identity. So I like to teach people how to change on this kind of level. So that's
really well said. And I think it's such an important part of our spiritual work. I think a lot of people get caught up in the love and light and the feel good, but much of spirituality, and as you're kind of saying that, I'm thinking how important doing this self-work is. Things like self-love, right? Is that something that that you talk a lot about when you talk about this work that you do?
Yeah, self-love is a really interesting topic. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to someone's mind when they think of self-love is, okay, I'll go and treat myself, I'll go and buy some new clothes, I'll go and do some fancy things for myself. And that is all great and well, but what I've learned along my journey with the healing is self-love is more of a state of being. And the more you kind of do this inner work, becoming aware of your shadow aspects, we could say they're just layers of conditioning, things that have happened to us. I think a kid has a perfect form of self-love. They're not worried about what other people think. They're just embodying, who they are. And as you get to a certain age, obviously things start to shift, and how we view things change. And so for me, a lot of the self-love journey is just releasing a lot of that, again, releasing certain beliefs and conditions that have, made us think that showing parts of ourselves to the world is, we don't want to show that part of the world of ourselves to the world because we might find it embarrassing. And when you do things like shadow work, you release that, you no longer have those thoughts, and that over time I believe creates more self-love, because yes, of course you care about what other people's opinions, but you're more authentic to who you are.
And it's a challenging thing, isn't it? And I know you've got a fitness background and you've worked around people that are bettering their bodies, and maybe I think in modern culture, there's almost an obsession with the physicality, what we look like, how maybe ripped our body is or thin a woman is. It can be a tough thing to traverse, can't it? Because we're bombarded with perfection now wherever we look, and particularly I think social media feeds this image of what the perfect body is or what we should look like. And technology has played, I think, a pretty big part in kind of reshaping what we see as normal. What would you say to those people that maybe struggle with the constant exposure to this perceived perception?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think if you look at things like Instagram and social media, is people are only showing the best parts of their lives. You know, that if you look at the best shot where they've taken from their body, the best moments with their friends, maybe they're getting married, and it seems like everyone's got everything figured out. Like everyone's got everything figured out except me. And it makes people feel not great, when we need to realize that a lot of people who are actually showing those parts of their lives, what seems amazing behind the scenes, it's not always as great as it might be. And for me as well, you know, doing the fitness, I went through a stage of doing a bit of physique competing. So I would actually get on stage and I would show my work to an audience. And that was just one of the ways that I enjoyed expressing my love for lifting weights at the time. But it did get to a point where it became unhealthy and it wasn't, you know, normal. You know, getting your body fat that low, being ripped, yes, it can look aesthetic or pleasing to the eye, but me experiencing that wasn't an enjoyable phase. And so,
Did you feel healthy when you were competing in competition, or did you feel kind of moody and depleted of energy? How was it for you going through that?
yeah. So particularly the last month or so, the first kind of, you spend quite a long time prepping to get your body fat down that low, but the last month is miserable because you know, your carbohydrates are really low. You start manipulating water, and you're getting your body fat down to a place where it's not comfortable, and your body is telling you this is dangerous, and it goes into survival mode. So obviously, you know, I was actually doing my university exams at the same time, which was not a good mix, trying to do that and that at the same time. And yeah, the process of that isn't where it should be. Okay, I looked, you know, I looked the best that I probably had looked, but I was inside, it wasn't a very good experience. I'm glad I did it. I understand what it's about now, but from my perspective, it's not what healthy living is really all about.
We were talking about sort of self-love before. Do you think at the time for you, it was something that was maybe lacking in self-love, that you were trying to maybe prove validation through physicality? Was that what was going on, or was it more about the competition itself?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would say a bit of both, actually. I mean, for me, growing up, I had two brothers, and they ended up doing professional rugby at a very high level, you know, professionally and stuff. And for me, I was actually quite a short kid. I didn't grow till I was about 16 or 17, and the gym became a place that was okay. I can use this to get stronger for sports. Um, you can use this to get fitter. And I look back on it now from the perspective of kind of the shadow work and the healing that I've done on myself. I would say yes, there was definitely a part of me that wanted to maybe be acknowledged and to be seen, and this was one of the ways in which I could do it. I mean, the weightlifting and the training I loved as well, so that's why I say it's a combination of both, because I did genuinely actually really enjoy the process of doing that. But at the same time, I think because I was using things like Instagram and I was putting pictures of myself, showing the stuff I'd done in the gym. And I kind of thought to myself afterwards, that really isn't me. And I can see that a part of me was maybe trying to show people, hey, look, this is what I can do. And that's not healthy.
Well, it's such a part of our modern culture, isn't it? This need to fit in and be perfect. And if we can portray that, certainly what you were saying earlier, if we can embody that and show that online, we get I think it's a dopamine hit every time we maybe get the likes or get the validation, or we feel that we've achieved something. I think it's an interesting area, isn't it? And I'll get your thoughts on this, that, when we do have, and many of the audience will have what they deem a spiritual awakening experience, or they're coming to maybe view life in a very different way. We've got to sort of unpack certain things. So how do we have and be and embody a spiritual life, but also we do want to look good, and we do maybe even want to wear good clothes, or we do want to look after ourselves. How have you found balance between, and looking at you today, I'm sure you're still training pretty regularly in the gym, and you probably really enjoy that part of your life. How do you balance that with your spirituality now?
Well, when I initially went through the spiritual process, after a while it became all consuming. Everything was about spirituality and meditation and healing. And after about a couple of years of doing it, my enjoyment for it started to become less enthusiastic. And I came to a point when I started to realize, if you really understand things on a spiritual level, everything is spiritual. Everything has its sacredness, we could say. And so for me, like, I was into the spirituality, the meditation, I was doing that lifestyle very strongly for a couple of years. But then after a time, I was like, okay, I need to get back into the real world. And I could integrate what I had learned and used in spiritually into my everyday life. So I was saying, okay, how can I bring this into my relationships, into my lifestyle, into my business, and mix the two together, because I think they can complement each other if you use spirituality in a good way. So that's how
well articulated. And I think it can. I remember Eckhart Tolle, who I've certainly read all his material and followed his teachings. I remember he did a recording once, and he spoke about the gym, and he said you can actually turn it into a spiritual practice itself, a meditation, because there's moving meditation. So even the fact, the repetition of the sets, it can be quite meditative, can't it? In that sense, you can almost transmute it and bring it into a daily routine, a daily practice. I know I do that. And I also find, and I'll ask you this question as well, when I do work out, there is, I guess, and I try not to have my smartphone with me, or it's on aeroplane mode, I get some really good time to unpack the thoughts of the day and also work through some of the thoughts of the day. Do you experience that when you work out, just maybe a bigger sense of presence?
Yeah, even before I went through the spiritual stuff, the gym was kind of my go-to place. If I had a bad day, or there was lots going on and my mind was racing, the gym would be where I would go to. And I remember reading sort of The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and watching much of his stuff on YouTube. And I started to implement the presence of now with whatever I was doing. So I was initially doing it mainly through the meditations and those kind of things. But then even when I was doing other things, I would say, okay, can I be present now? Can I be aware of my movements? Can I be aware of my thoughts? And then I started to do it in my everyday life, including that of the gym. And it became even more powerful going to the gym when I could practice this presence as well. So yeah, I would say you could definitely use it in
Yeah.
areas of your life.
So has your process changed around, even physically, when you maybe compare the way you looked when you were competing to now? Do you struggle with satisfaction around your physicality? Do you always feel like I'm trying to get somewhere? Or have you been able to really develop a healthy relationship with the now and how you look now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not trying to get to that level like I was before. For me, it's just enjoying more of the process. It's okay. I'm enjoying a bit, getting a bit stronger. I'm learning a bit more about movement. And what I was doing before was more specific. Now I'm sort of more overall with the types of different training that I can do, just purely for the enjoyment of it. But yeah, I simply kind of I don't, keeping healthy and in shape has always been important to me. But it's I'm not doing it from a place of lack. I need to look better because I'm feeling insecure. I'm just doing it because I enjoy being healthy.
You
And so
enjoy
my
the process, you enjoy working out, it's a part of who you are.
yeah,
But you've brought it into more of a healthy way of being rather than this obsession. It's something that a lot of people I know struggle with. It's that sense of balance around how can we be in the world but not of the world, and how can we find a sense of balance? What has been the key for finding balance in your own journey?
that's really interesting. I mean, I'm going to have to refer back to the identity shifting that I help people with at the moment. And the way I like to describe it is the difference between your worldly self and your infinite self. And I'll explain that as simply as I can. But your worldly self is obviously the things that you do and the relationships that you have, profession, what are you doing in your day-to-day life. But one of the keys to shifting your identity is to be detached from this. So what I try to do is I try to embody the characteristics of the kind of lifestyle that I want, the type of relationships, the business, the people I want to be around, but I'm not attached to it. I'm not like, I need to have this, because when you have that resistance, that often gets pulled away from you anyway. And it's one of the benefits of, I found meditation has helped a lot with it. So I'm able to keep detached from over identifying with certain things in my life. Like when I was going to the gym, I was like, this is who I am. If I miss a workout, I miss a meal, then, I'm unhappy with myself. But I'm able to step back and see my thought patterns and see my emotions from a different perspective and realize that's not really who I am. I'm the one who's watching that. And that has allowed me to not be so attached to things, but also create more balance. Okay, I've got the gym, but also I can work on relationships. I can work on having a healthy lifestyle. I can work on spending good time with my friends. And it's through that perspective that I've been able to create more of a balance in my life.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm fascinated to know. You were talking about the healing modality that you work with. How did that come about? Is that something that you trained in? I'm not familiar with that, so that's why I'm asking the question. Did you train in that, or is that something you've developed yourself?
It wasn't something I seeked. It was one of those strange experiences where I felt like it came to me. So I was on this sort of deep journey of healing. I was doing lots of meditation. I was becoming much more aware of my thought patterns, and I was releasing. And it was actually during the lockdown, which I used that time to go more within myself and do more of this work. And I remember I was sitting in a meditation and my hands started doing this funny movement. I was like, what's going on here? This is a little bit strange. And then I started to speak this sort of language, and it was
And
unfamiliar.
that's light language that you're referring to, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's light language, and I started to do research about it and looking at it, so I could see other people could do it as well. So I wasn't going crazy. And then about 3 or 4 months later, I was drawn to the guy who taught Star Magic. His name's called Jerry Sargent, and he has a fascinating story of his lifestyle, how he became a healer. And I remember getting this really strong pull to go and do the course. And so I did a 5-day course, and it was amazing. Just kind of the people there, the things that we learned. It was kind of very off planet, I would say. But the stuff that you could kind of tap into, the stuff that you could do. I mean, you're working with light and information. And when it comes to healing, like, I'm not here saying I'm a healer, because when it comes to healing, all I'm doing is I'm facilitating someone. So everyone has this ability to self-heal. I'm just working with the light and the energetic patterns in their body and shifting it in such a way so they can then heal themselves.
Yeah, beautifully said. I work as a QHHT practitioner, and we have the same ethos, if you like, where it's really the client is the one that does the healing. It's just that we facilitate. And you articulated really well there, where, you know, it's an energy force that is, you know, and we work with that force rather than being the one to give it to someone. And I think it's a powerful lesson, particularly in the world at the moment, because we're kind of going through this collective shift where people are perhaps changing their relationship to the saviors outside of themselves, and that they're finding now in this time that the savior that they seek is within them. And this is I think, a spiritual principle that was taught by Jesus and Buddha, that the kingdom of heaven was within, as Jesus did say. I want you to talk to that for a moment, and how you see this collective shift occurring on the planet from your perspective at the moment. What are you seeing?
I will only come from my perspective, because there's so much information out there on this topic. And actually, when I went through my spiritual awakening, I did a QHHT. That was one of the first things that I went to. And I remember going to the practitioner and, you know, reading Dolores Cannon's books and looking her up on YouTube. And I was fascinated by the work that she was doing. And how you say from that is, what people would call it is a shift from, you know, victim consciousness to creator consciousness. And I believe the victim consciousness was simply thinking that everything that happens outside of you is happening outside of you. And there's something called the Law of Correspondence, which refers to so within, so without. And when you make that shift, is you realize, well, everything outside of me is happening as a reflection of what's going on within me. And so when you change that perspective, and instead of blaming people, the circumstance, or the situation outside of yourself, you say, okay, I'm obviously projecting this out into the world. Let's take a closer look within myself. What emotions are there? What feelings are there? What thoughts are there? And when you start to realize, when you become aware of these and you start to release them, and you change your internal state, change your internal programming, suddenly things outside of you start to shift, and you're thinking, well, I didn't do anything outside of me. I changed something within me, and then the outside starts to change. It's a bit like, you know, in the spiritual community, people talk about vibration. You know, if you're in a high vibration, or if you're in a low vibration. And what I came to see is, there's often the ethos of like, oh, don't give up, keep pushing through, you know, give it everything that you've got. And I think there's a certain place for that. But at the same time, if you're always feeling bad internally, and you're feeling negative a lot of the time, again, negativity isn't bad. But we are actually creating many of the problems outside of ourselves because of how we are feeling. And if we can work on feeling better, then the outside becomes a little bit easier. It's like the obstacles start to disappear as you raise your vibration. And so for me, it's been more of an internal journey. And I'm not saying don't take action. I'm all about an advocate of taking action and doing things. But I think action should be taken after you have changed something internally first.
Yeah, well said. And I know, you know, just as you were saying that, I was thinking about, you know, what's happening right now on the planet. We're seeing a lot of, I know Dolores Cannon, you mentioned her. I've read her books also, and I think many in the audience will have as well, she talked about a splitting of realities or a splitting of worlds. And I wonder if you could touch on that from your perspective. The way I kind of see it is that people are maybe polarizing more to one area or another. People that are maybe being consumed by fear, they're maybe digressing into more fear. And then we're seeing maybe those on the spiritual path who are kind of ascending into this new way of being, coming to realize that we do create our reality with our thoughts, our words, our actions. Are you seeing this split happen around you in your own life?
Absolutely. And I think it's becoming more and more obvious. When I first came across Dolores Cannon's work, my initial thought was, there's going to be X amount of people that are going to disappear into some new dimension or something like that. And what I've noticed in my own life is someone who's done more of the inner work and been on this spiritual path, they can still occupy the same space as someone who hasn't maybe delved down this path yet. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you got two people walking down the street and then something outside of them happens, something what we would deem as negative. Now, the ones that's more in what people call like a 3D consciousness, they would react more out of fear to that situation. Whereas the one who's done more of the inner work, they would react differently to that situation. And from the stuff that I've looked into is much of our reaction determines the timeline that we get pulled down. So if we're always reacting out of fear, worry, those lower vibrational states, we're going to continue to get pulled down a timeline where we experience more of that. And the splitting, in my opinion, is just someone who's reacting at a different level because, for example, they've done the shadow work, they have released much of the anger or hatred or frustration that they were holding in their body. Of course, we all still have remnants of that, but because they've released a large amount of it, they are reacting to things differently in their life. For me, a good sign that someone is healed is, let's say something happens to them or a person says something and it triggers you, it triggers you in some sort of way. But if you process that and release that, the same thing can happen again to you, but you react differently. You're not as bothered by it because you have healed whatever it was that person was triggering within you. And so more kind of this process that, doing the spiritual work, because your reaction is very different to things outside of you, you end up getting pulled down more of a positive timeline, therefore experiencing what we could say as the new earth in terms of you making more money and being with the people that you want to be around and creating more of the lifestyle that you want, because again, it's just reflecting more of that inner peace that you have managed to get to.
Yeah, well said. How are people around you, as you talked about having a spiritual awakening, and obviously you made many changes in your life, even the work that you're doing. How have those and maybe your family, how have they reacted to you making these changes?
Very interesting when it initially started. Initially they were somewhat interested, but it was, obviously they think you're a little bit crazy. What are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. But what I do is I would plant seeds of interest. And so sometimes, when I was going through this initial spiritual awakening, I wanted to tell everyone what was going on and what was really going on behind the scenes and all of this stuff that was going on inside my head. And people just switched off and they weren't really interested in stuff. So for me, what I would do is, if I wanted to help people around me with the spiritual stuff that I was learning, is I would plant seeds of interest. And if they were interested, I would allow them to come to me and then to ask me questions. I wouldn't ever try and tell people, now this is the way that it is and you're wrong and I'm right. Because again, I was at that point when if you came to me with the stuff that I'm coming out now, I would also think the same. So I never sort of think that one's better than the other and that we're all at different levels in the journey. But the stuff that I was getting into, I noticed a big shift as my own energy changed. Is I found it harder and harder to be around certain people, like the job that I was in, the people, because my energy was shifting and it wasn't a match anymore. And the more of this kind of work that I did, is I started being pulled to people, situations, places, and circumstances that would reflect more of that change of the energy in myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I'm seeing this with a lot of people, around me, people I work with, um, people even in the spiritual community. There is certain fear about the future. I think we've seen certain things unfold in the last sort of 18 months of some drastic things, certainly here in Australia. And I know for a lot of people, it can bring up fear. What would you say to those people that are maybe sort of looking at maybe the direction humanity is going, and they have great concern about where we are going as a planet? What would you say to them to maybe inspire some confidence or some hope?
That's a good question. I would say just focus more on you and allow other people to do whatever that they need to do. I mean, for me, along this journey, as I've progressed along it, I ended up having a few epiphanies and realization, and this thing that kind of made me stop trying to control many things in my life. And that was to realize that everything is happening perfectly. On our perspective, we would judge that and we'd say, no, it's not. Look at all of this stuff that's happening negatively outside of us. But on a bigger perspective, is things are working out in divine order. And many times, like when you get to a certain point in your life and you look back and you're like, oh, I can connect the dots now. I see why that had to happen. And many times when we're immersed in our problems and the chaos that's going on in the world, it's difficult to step back and see the perspective. And I think there'll be a certain point down the road when we'll be able to look back and be like, okay, I could see why that had to happen. So we could have these realizations. We look at a lot of the dark stuff and stuff that we would perceive as negative. Many times allowing that stuff or seeing it unfold allows people to now take action and step in and say, look, this isn't good enough, that we need to change this. And if that didn't come to the surface, then people wouldn't do anything about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's certainly waking people up. I know I forgot to ask you this earlier, but was there a catalyst for your own spiritual awakening? Because I find that many people have, maybe it's through the pain teacher that they come to wake up, so to speak. Was there a catalyst for you to wake up? Was something going on in your life at the time?
Yeah, that's what Eckhart totally talks about, isn't it? He refers to it as the pain body. When you go through enough discomfort or uncomfortable things in your life, it acts like a pressure pump and it kind of like pops you out the other side and you have this spiritual awakening. I mean, for me, when I was at university, after my first semester, I caught something called glandular fever, which was like this chronic so it led to chronic illness. So I was ill for 2 years. I couldn't do any of the gym. I saw loads of different specialists and I had a really hard time through that process. I struggled with anxiety and depression and all those kind of things. And that acted as like a pressure pump. It's like when you go through enough discomfort, it's almost like your consciousness disconnects from your mind and your body. And then that's the spiritual awakening. Who's this other part of myself? And then, so I went through that process, but it wasn't about until a year after that I was just sitting at my desk at work and I read something about spirituality that just popped out the page, and that triggered my spiritual awakening. But what was weird with me was like when I went through my spiritual awakening, for the first 4 to 6 months, I was in this very blissful, very peaceful state, and I was like, wow, what's this? This is amazing. And then that's when all the shadow work, the healing, all that started to happen. So it was a bit weird for me because it happened almost the other way around. Of course, I had plenty of things before that had probably led to the process of me being spiritually awakened. But as a kid, as well, as I hated being told what to do. I was in So like I always looked at kind of the system and the way that things were, it just didn't kind of suit me as a person. So I was always bound to kind of try and choose a different route, and then the spiritual awakening came about.
Yeah. You said that you had a QHHT session. I'm fascinated to know what was your experience then? What came out of those sessions for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just did the one session,
Okay,
and just the one session, and it was enough for me, and I really enjoyed doing it. But mine was weird because it was like more about in between lives, supposed to past lives. There was one or two past lifetimes, but for example, when I first went through my spiritual awakening, I was very connected to certain star systems like the Pleiades and Lyra, and I was really pulled to those places. It's like, wow, I feel connected to that. And then when I did the QHHT, it brought in some past lives, like why I was maybe here at this time, what my role was. And it was very much linked to helping people raise their consciousness, raise their awareness, which is really linked in with the stuff that I'm doing at the moment. And I remember having this experience as well during the QHHT, where it was this process of me in between lives as a soul. And I remember seeing sort of the color and the shape and the process of how my soul was maneuvering in these other realms. And about 3 months after that, I was reading a book called The Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. You might have heard of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he was explaining this process between lives as well. And he was telling me how the soul looks, the evolution. And that I got to those about 2 or 3 pages where it was describing a certain evolution of a soul. And he was doing a client, and she was going through this process, and she was describing her soul in between lives. And it was exactly the same as mine when I did the QHHT. So there was no, reason why that was, but I was like, wow. I started to connect the dots with that. But that's what happened with me when I did the QHHT.
Wow. And I guess you sort of maybe got a lot of questions answered around life purpose. Did
Yes.
your higher self sort of kind of predict some of the things you'd be doing now? Have things amazed you about the synchronicities that have maybe occurred since having that? Because I know for me, when I had my session, I went in with various questions, and my life path really has unfolded very similarly to what the information that my higher self said at the time.
Yeah, it was. I remember I was just lying on the bed and feeling this energy come into my body. And it said at a certain age, or do some traveling. That's the current stage that I'm in now. So far, it has predicted to be correct. So yeah, it was saying some interesting stuff. What's going to happen maybe in around my sort of mid-30s. Stuff that was going to happen in my 40s. So I don't know what's going to happen there, if that's going to unfold, but it seems to be on track at the moment. And I think with that sort of stuff as well, I think it's very valuable and helpful. But at the same time, I think, we're maybe here to, I don't like to say this, but maybe learn certain lessons. But there are many paths in which we can take to learn those things. So yes, my higher self could come through and say these things, but there's many different pathways that I can still learn the same lessons with maybe what I'm meant to do here. So I think, we can still exercise free will. But so far it's been right.
And life, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, life is a school, and we come here to learn certain lessons and pass certain grades, so to speak. What's your most profound lesson that you've learnt along the way, along your journey?
Well, I would probably say releasing control so far. And that was a big thing that came to me when I did ayahuasca. So after I did my healing course, a couple of weeks later, I always wanted to do ayahuasca, but I wanted to make sure that it was with the right people. And anyway, the people who did the course, I saw what they do and I trusted them. So I decided to go and do the ayahuasca. And the medicine kind of taught me a few things. And it was like, you trying to control the things that you're trying to control is like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. And I was like, it was giving me all of this amazing, valuable information that I wanted to use in my life. And I was trying to sort of have on ayahuasca, I was trying to write the stuff in my notebook, which I couldn't do. But it was, the more kind of we release the control, the more control we actually have, I found. So, for me, I have a direction, a place, sort of where I'd like to go in my life, but I've kind of let go more of control of how it's going to turn out. So how it's going to get there. I've always wanted to know how things are going to work out. How's this going to work for me? But as I've let go of control and allowed sort of the universe to sort of guide me more efficiently, then things happen with much more ease and much more grace.
So I've noticed that you've embarked on a YouTube journey. You've set your own channel up. You're doing some pretty regular videos now. How many videos are you doing each week?
Trying to go for about 3-4 weeks at the moment. As well, and that I started on the TikTok journey, which I didn't really want to do, but I got this very strong impulse to do TikTok. And it can work exactly the same way. You just get the screen and you just talk to the your phone and to people in exactly the same way. And that reach has gotten much quicker in a very short period of time. But also I see the value in YouTube as well. So I'm definitely going to continue doing both of those. And YouTube, I think, is going to be more slow and gradual, but hopefully as it builds, then it will get more reach and go for more people. But
what's your vision with YouTube? Are you wanting to teach people the spiritual lessons you've learned? Is this, do you feel, a part of your calling and your mission here is to teach people some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, as I've kind of gone along this journey, I've noticed my niche is maybe changing a little bit. My general goal was the focus of spiritual ascension and manifestation. Those were the things that I wanted to focus on. And future down the line, I would like to do things like retreats, ceremonies for people. But at the moment, I'm just focusing on building the channel and building my courses at the moment. So I'm going to be making some digital products that help people spiritually, whether it be a 3 or 4 day meditation course or something to do with energy work of some sort. And I'm also doing the process of creating Reality Shift, which is the identity shifting program. So that would be like a 3-month program where I take 20 people over a 3-month period and I help them shift their identity on a deep level. So it seems like there's about 3 or 4 things that I love doing, but I'm almost spreading my energy a little bit too thin. So I think as I go along this journey, it will become more clear to me what people need more than other things.
Yeah, and sometimes people, you just sort of have to do these things. They unfold with time, don't they? I know, I was thinking this the other day, and I know many people that are on the spiritual journey, we sometimes struggle with integrating technology and not being taken over by it. Do you find it challenging just around, obviously you're using technology and it's a wonderful tool. Do you find the balance hard to be able to do your work and the videos and the research that would go into producing, say, a YouTube video and putting everything together? Do you find it challenging around being too consumed with the technology itself?
Yeah, and again, it comes to that balance for me. Fortunately, I can always catch myself if I'm thinking I've spent too much time around technology. I just become more aware of how I feel, particularly, and I need to go and ground myself outside on the grass, go take a walk, go to a waterfall, whatever it might be. And
Bali's a nice place to do that.
Exactly, Bali's a great place for this, so I'm very lucky in that aspect. And I can see the power in technology, and it allows me to reach people and to do the stuff that I do. But at the same time, being around technology too much, for me, I'm not particularly good at technology. It's something that I've had to kind of work through and just learn through trial and error myself. But I've actually got something called a rodent coil, which is like this copper wire that I put around my neck, which helps actually balance out the electromagnetic frequency of technology. So it allows me to be a bit more we could say centered around it. But yeah, being around technology too much, as long as for me as I become aware of it as well, things like, that dopamine hit, seeing who's liked your video, who's done this, and I become aware, okay, am I picking up my phone for a specific reason? Am I actually doing this to help with my work, or am I just picking my phone up because I have that urge to pick up my phone? And for me, it's learning to distinguish between the two.
I think it's the struggle of the age, isn't it? Because particularly for younger generations, it's, kids are getting devices in their hands 3 or 4 years old, and it almost becomes an extension of who we are. And there is this struggle going on, I think, between being overtaken by or having an over reliance on technology. An interesting thing that happened to me the other day, I purposely left my phone at home and I went out for 3 or 4 hours, and I just noticed, not having the device with me, how the tendency to reach for it was occurring over and over, and almost a feeling in the end of, I just got to get home, not for any other reason, but to get back to the device. So I think we all have to watch ourselves, don't we? That we create some kind of space between us and the technology itself.
Yeah, I think having that, and it does come back to a bit of self-discipline as well. You just need to catch yourself when you're doing that, and maybe have certain hours, like, from this time to this time, I'm not going to touch my phone. I'm going to leave it to be. And if you notice yourself having that urge, then just become conscious of it and decide, okay, I'm not going to do this. It's easier said than done. But it's interesting as well when it comes to energy work and things that I help people with healing as well. Is, I was doing this client the other day, and I was helping remove some energetic stuff for her. And she kept having this urge to keep looking at her phone again and again and again. I won't go into the details of why this was, due to the energetic work, but we had to work on this process of her detaching from her phone. And when she did, her actual energy field around her body became strengthened. So being around, like, the device, like particularly things like, releasing the dopamine, or for watching a video that releases some adrenaline or cortisol or whatever it might be, is that has a big effect on our energetic field around our body. And that affects how we feel, our motivation, our decisions, and everything that we do in a day-to-day life. So I think technology is amazing, but at the same time, learning when to disconnect is really important.
Yeah, learning to disconnect and almost creating a routine around it, or limiting our time to it. I'm interested to ask you about your meditation life. You said that you're meditating maybe 2 hours a day. Tell us a little bit about your meditation practice. Do you do this over periods of the day, or is this one session? How does your meditation life look?
Yeah, so when I initially started, it wasn't that easy. I would focus on, just for about 5 to 10 minutes, on bringing my attention back to my breath again and again. So I would notice my thoughts would rumble off for a couple of minutes, and then I'd bring my focus back to my breath. And I would simply breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth, and that would be one breath, and I would count to 10. And that was a really simple practice for the good first 3 or 4 months of me getting into meditation. And it was really simple and really easy. And then when I went along this journey more and more, it was much easier to observe my thoughts, and the meditations became so much more enjoyable because I was able to attain all of this peace while doing it. Like, when I initially started the meditation, I was like, it was really hard. It was difficult. Your thoughts go off, and it's not as easy. But the more that I did it, the easier that it would become, and I would progress to 20 minutes, half an hour, and then more if I felt like doing that. And now I've sort of gotten to the point where I feel I can integrate that level of control over my brain waves in everyday situations. And like we were talking about earlier, that's how I feel I can, I can go on a walking meditation. I can go to the gym meditating. I can eat my food meditating. Obviously not all the time, but if I feel like it's needed and I want to do it, I'll do it. And I think if you feel called to do more meditation as well, there's a reason for it. Most people don't do 2 hours of meditation a day, but I felt really called to do it at the time, and it's helped me a lot doing that meditation when I needed to do it. So.
Yeah, and it's a great way to start the day. I feel that when there's not that space in the morning to sort of get into this sort of more of a consciousness, my day goes in a different direction if I don't get that time. And there's sometimes that, you know, occasionally I'll miss that and have to make up for it in the day. But I do notice a big difference in the quality of my day when I don't get to meditate in the morning. Is that, do you typically start your morning meditating?
Yeah, I mean, I have a specific morning routine, and I find if I don't do it, then my day seems to be more of a struggle. That I usually get up, I'm only doing about half an hour of meditation in the morning, and that's all I feel I need at the moment. But I do a combination of some energy work, some breath work. I might have a cold shower if I'm feeling particularly motivated that morning. And that's kind of just my simple morning routine. And it just gets me in a good headspace for the day. I like to get up relatively early and do most of my work early in the morning. That's where I find I'm most productive. But yeah, all the time I'll start off mostly doing a meditation first thing in the day.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's been great sharing this time with you today. How can my audience get in touch with you? How can they find you?
Well, I'm most active on YouTube and TikTok at the moment, but you can contact me either via Instagram, which is just Charlie Homer, or do they do emails? Do they want email information?
We'll leave some links maybe to your YouTube channel and your Instagram below, so people can easily connect to you there. And are you available to for one-on-one sessions with people if they're interested in contacting you as well?
Yeah, at the moment, I've obviously got a schedule with certain clients, but I definitely have availability if someone's interested in healings or coaching at the moment. Yes.
And that can be done online, yeah?
The healing can be done distance, so I can do distance
Great.
healing. And the coaching can be done online, yeah, just via Zoom or webcam.
Wonderful. Well, it's been great connecting with you, Charlie, and I hope we can do this again sometime. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, brother. All the best.
Thank you.